Wednesday live for June 22nd. I'm your host, David Michalek. Here with me is America's #1 credit expert, formerly with FICO and Equifax, John Ulzheimer. John, welcome.
Hey, David, thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. And we get to do this time what we didn't, or cover this subject today that we didn't get to cover last Wednesday. Unfortunately, I was trying to do this from home, and it didn't occur to me that in my new house that I'd have a dead cable outlet in the wall, so I couldn't connect. So we postponed, but we are back today, and thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Don't be shy. Introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from. And as with all the Credit Versio Q&A Wednesday lives, this is all about you. Feel free to ask any question that you like. We do like to keep the subject limited to learning about credit, asking credit questions, anything about scores, the bureaus, and so forth. That's what we're here for. That's what John's here for. The only subject we don't talk about on these videos is credit repair. So if you do have a credit repair related question, you can post it. I won't bring it up on the screen, but I'll swing back around and answer it later. Okay, so John, you did a great article recently about debt to income. And I thought that was really good. So I know there's a couple things we want to cover here today, but one subject is going to be a little bit heavier. I thought we'd get into that second, do a little bit of Q&A. But if you could talk to us a little bit about debt to income and how that's really relevant to everybody's financial lives, that would be great.
Sure. And I'll also dispel a few myths about debt to income that people in my field that get paid way too much money per hour seem to keep getting wrong. So debt to income is a wealth metric, meaning that it is generally used by a lender to determine whether or not an applicant has the capacity to take on a new payment obligation. And why is that important? Well, it's important because, number one, lenders are now required to determine whether or not you have the capacity to make payments on new obligations. And so it helps them to comply with that obligation. That was actually a CARD Act obligation from 2009. And then second, maybe more importantly, it helps them to decide or to determine whether or not they're likely to be paid back, not from a credit scoring perspective, meaning not predicting the likelihood of somebody choosing to make the payment. That's really what the credit score is designed to do, whether or not you're going to choose to make your payment, versus debt to income ratio, which helps to predict whether or not you have the ability to make your payment. Meaning, do you even have free and clear funds at the end of the month in order to be able to make a repeating payment? So debt to income is often misdefined. I've seen it defined as the amount of debt you have divided by your income. And if that were true, then we'd all have, not all of us, but a lot of us would have debt to income ratios in the several 100%, and we would never qualify for anything. So it's not actually the amount of debt that you have. It is the aggregate of your reoccurring monthly payments. So if you, instead of your mortgage loan, it is the mortgage payment. Instead of your car loan amount, it's the monthly payment on your car loan. So if you were to look at your credit report and add up all of your scheduled monthly payments and all of your reoccurring obligations, that's going to give you the sum total of your, or the aggregate of your monthly payment obligations. And you take that figure and you divide that figure by your gross monthly income. So what is gross monthly income? Gross monthly income is your paycheck before anything is taken out of it. So in other words, before all of the taxes and such are taken out of it. So not your net, which is the amount that you actually get to take home every 2 weeks or once a month or how often you get paid, but it's the gross amount. So it's actually the larger of the numbers with respect to, or it's the largest of all of the numbers with respect to your income. So if you were to take that first figure, so the sum of all of your monthly payment obligations, and divide it by your gross monthly income. So let's say that you have a really good job, you make $120,000 a year, your gross monthly income is $10,000. So you would take the sum of your monthly payments, divide it by that $10,000, multiply that amount by 100, and then it would yield a ratio or a percentage. And that ratio represents the amount of your gross monthly income that is essentially pre-obligated in the
Mm-hmm.
form of a payment that you have to make every
Right.
single month. So that ratio helps lenders to determine whether or not you have the capability to take on additional debt and an additional monthly payment, or if it would be stressful, financially stressful for you to do so. Generally speaking, well, always the lower that ratio, the better it is for you, the better it is for a prospective lender.
Mm-hmm.
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau indicates in their documentation or their publications that 43% or lower is generally what you're going to need for I guess a garden variety 30-year fixed rate mortgage loan. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it's up to the lender to determine what they're comfortable with respect to your debt to income ratio. So, all right, so here's where the myth busting begins. Now that we've defined what
Great.
is the debt to income ratio, number one, your debt to income ratio is not on your credit report. Why is it not on your credit report? Well, in order to have a debt to income ratio, you have to know two things. You have to know, number one, your gross monthly income, and number two, the aggregate of your payment obligations. You can get the payment obligation information from your credit report, or a pretty good job of it. It may not be completely accurate and completely complete, but you're going to get a pretty good idea of your monthly payment obligations from your credit report, but you're not going to know anything about someone's income. So
Right.
without, half of the math problem, you're not going to be able to calculate your debt to income ratio, which means that the debt to income ratio is not on a credit report. Myth
Right.
number two, debt to income ratio has absolutely nothing to do with your credit scores. The two values are entirely unrelated to each other. One does not have any influence to the other, and the other does not have any influence to the first. So it
Right.
doesn't matter what your credit score is. It's an independent metric from the debt to income ratio. You can have a horrible credit score and a fantastic debt to income ratio, and you can
Yeah.
have a horrible debt to income ratio and a pretty darn good credit score. So they're not influential on each other. In fact, they're entirely different metrics. And so when you ever hear people talk about the various C's of lending, credit capacity, collateral, well, the credit C is obviously credit reports and credit scores, and the capacity C is things like debt to income ratio or wealth metrics. So
Right.
little debt to income ratio 101 for you.
Excellent. And we got with us Mike. So disappointed that John did not join us for Best Friends or Best Friends Day. I'm not sure what that is. There a Best Friends Day?
I don't know. I think every week there's a Margarita Day or Best Margarita Day.
Okay, well, I can get behind something like that.
Of
MK says,
course.
good evening. Tarpon Springs, Florida. Okay, Louis is back. Oh, there he is. Louis, hello, welcome. Good to see you again. All right, so great explanation on DTI, and it's funny. I categorize some of the beliefs that people have about DTI. Like you'll hear the same thing coming from people who say, well, in fact, John, I just read this in an article not too long ago about somebody talking about people being declined for jobs because of their credit score. It's like, how many times have you and I talked about that? And again, I see another article in somewhat reputable publication. I'm like, wow, it's amazing what continues to get recycled out there. Hearing it from somebody who heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody, and it keeps
Yeah.
getting traction. San
Yeah.
Pedro,
No.
California. Kimberly, welcome.
Yeah. You're right about the reputable sources. The National Consumer Law Center just threw something out on LinkedIn maybe a few weeks ago where they basically continue to pimp this idea that credit scores are used by employers, that they want to make that they would love it if that were illegal. It's very frustrating because there's a lot of things that are valid, ideas or that are legitimately good ideas.
Yeah.
Making something that doesn't happen illegal isn't a good. It's hard
Yeah.
enough to get politicians to do anything, and to get to waste their time and ability to cooperate and work with each other on something that doesn't even happen. It's like outlawing unicorns, right? Or making it illegal to breed unicorns. It's but you know what? Whatever. It's something that the myths. I get it. They're an occupational hazard. That's certainly not the only myth that will not die. that credit score myth.
Yeah.
I've had to chase down a couple of reputable reporters over the last couple of weeks for continuing to publish articles that suggest that the utilization ratio of your credit cards is worth 30% of the
Oh,
points
that that
in your credit score.
that one
And again,
is I see that more than I actually hear that from people. I mean, you and I have our beef with the so-called YouTube experts that we see all the time, but that's one that you'll see credit people talking about all over the place.
yeah, you're right. I and then, I mean, people argue that, well, what they really meant was that you should keep it below 30%. I'm like, well, that's not even right. Uh,
No.
so you're digging. I have the guy that I call my best friend. His first name is Brad, and he has a saying that's probably not a unique saying, but he always tells me is the best way to get out of a problem is to stop digging your hole. Right? A step one to
Hmm.
getting out of a problem is stop making your problem bigger.
Yeah.
And just these arguments that, well, really what they really meant was that you should keep it below 30%. Well, that's an error on top of an error because that's not even correct. What I think
Yeah.
what it is they see that the debt category is worth 30%, and they don't bother to do any more research and just kind of assume that the entire debt category is made up of one metric, which is revolving utilization, which
Right.
is completely not true. And look, don't believe me, go to FICO's website. There's a whole list of things that are in that category that is
Hmm.
collectively worth 30%, not called credit utilization. So
Right.
if
Right.
you don't believe me, that's fine. Just take 4 seconds and visit FICO's website, and then and do your own due diligence and learn for yourself. But you're right. Look, the myths are the occupational hazard. I love getting upset about them because it keeps me busy and gives me something else to talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, the credit scores and employment, and then the 30% value of
Well,
utilization
and
are
just
two
to
pretty
add this
awesome.
on top of the roaring fire, it's always too that inquiries are worth 10% of your score because it
That
is
is
in
a
that
good one.
10% category with FICO anyway of the new credit category.
That is right. It is in the new credit category. Some people call it the inquiry category,
Yeah.
but you're right. Um, it is yet another myth that just simply will not die.
Louis got a question. I just paid off my auto loan yesterday. How will this affect my credit mix? Louis, solid question.
Well, first off, congratulations, because that's awesome. Um,
Yes, definitely.
I got to tell you, I hope you don't wait for as long as I've waited. I sold a car about 6 weeks ago, and I still haven't been paid yet. The this whole issue of the title has to go to it's just it's a mess. And of course, workforce they keep telling me it's lack of workers in certain departments of the state that issue where the title comes from.
Oh
So
boy.
anywho, so hopefully Louis gets paid faster than, or gets his title faster than I'm waiting for a title so I can actually get the money I made on the sale of the car. So first off, and you're welcome, Louis. First off, just because you paid it off doesn't mean that it's going to disappear from your credit report. So to the extent that the auto loan was on your credit report in the first place, it's still going to be there. So from a mixed perspective, you're still going to have that installment loan. You're still going to have that auto loan. And assuming that it was paid on time, you're still going to have that positive trade line in your credit report. The credit bureaus actually will not remove that for at least 10 years. They all three have a policy as of the date of this webinar or Facebook Live, and they may change it tomorrow. But today, as of 6:14 Eastern time on the 22nd of June, the credit bureaus all have the same policy, which is that they will maintain positive information after it has gone inactive for a decade, even though they don't have an obligation to ever remove it because you're not required by law to remove anything positive. But
Yeah.
after a while, there's an issue of verifiability, and information does have to be verifiable in order for it to remain on a credit report. And so 10 years is where we are right now. So no, to the extent that it's still there, it shouldn't affect your mix at all. Well, here's something that I want to temper your expectation of the effect on your score. There's this kind of perception that when you get out of installment debt that your credit scores are going to go up and improve quite a bit.
Hmm.
and that's simply not true. So I would not expect your scores to go up because you have finished paying off that loan. And the reason you shouldn't expect it to go up is because it really didn't go down very much when you opened the account back however many years ago and had the largest balance on that loan
Yeah.
ever in the history of that particular loan. So installment debt is much more stable than revolving debt because it's secured. In your case, it was secured by your automobile. And so it defaults at a lower rate than unsecured debt because people would rather have their house and their car than they would keep their credit card if the payments,
Yeah.
if the DTI issues become problematic and you have to choose which item not to pay. So because it's not terribly predictive in the first place, you're not going to get a whole lot of value out of paying it off on the back end. I tell this story repeatedly when I sold a house several years ago and a $250,000 mortgage debt went away and my credit scores went up 4 points. And they may have gone up for something other than me paying off that debt. So you should be reasonable with your expectations as far as score improvement, because I wouldn't expect them to move very much, if at all.
What would you say to those who let's say, using Louis as an example, I'm not saying this is the case, but let's make some assumptions here that that's the only installment loan, active installment loan that Louis has on his credit report. He pays it off, and the score drops. And I hear that a lot from clients saying that, hey, I
Yep.
paid this off. And it's exactly they have the frame of mind that is very understandable. What you just described is like, hey, I made good on this debt. I paid it off. How come I'm not getting rewarded? Where the opposite takes effect, like, well, wait a minute, I paid it off. I'm no longer demonstrating month over month that I'm satisfying a loan, and my score dropped. Is there any correlation to that?
Yeah, there is some truth to that, and that happened to me also with a car loan that I paid off last year, actually. And what it is it has to do with recent activity on installment debt. Where
Mm.
that really becomes more um, frequent is when people who have really no debt at all, other than maybe one or two loans, and
Yeah.
then they pay off those loans, and now they have zero activity on on any sort of installment account. And you're actually rewarded for activity on installment accounts, not necessarily the balances, but just the
Right.
activity. So there are
Yeah.
some kind of narrow slices where that can occur. If you've got like student loans is a good example. If you've got tons of debt, multiple student loans, a mortgage, a car loan, and you pay something off, that's really a non-issue because you have so many other installment accounts that do have recent activity versus
Yeah.
someone who has very, very little installment debt and may pay off the only loan they have or one of the only loans they have. That's where you can see that type of action take place. Now, then also, let's be clear, we're not talking about the difference between FICO 800 and FICO 500. We're talking about
Yeah.
what's the organic and normal score movement, which is usually between plus or minus 15, 20 points. So you shouldn't
Yeah.
expect anything drastic to change in your score, and it's likely going to improve soon thereafter. Just don't argue to get that account off of your credit report now that it's been paid, because A, then you will remove an installment account from your credit report, and B, it may be an older account and may be helping your average age of trade metrics, and you don't want that thing to come off your credit report,
Yeah.
especially if it's in good standing.
Yeah, perfect example. I mean, I asked that question, obviously knowing the answer, but that happens a lot to people who have just a single installment loan on their credit report. And case in point, when I paid or satisfied a lease, about 3 years ago or so, that was the only installment loan I had because I didn't have a real estate mortgage loan on my credit report at the time. And exactly as you said, it wasn't substantial. It was a little bit outside the normal score migration, 20, 15, 20, maybe 25 points. I think it was a difference of about 30 points or so. And I captured that again just over time, paying off, just keeping my credit card debt down and satisfied. And I recovered in, I don't know, a few months or something like that. It wasn't drastic at all. I expected it, but it wasn't really drastic. Mike, this is why I enjoy this get together, because it's great to hear the fact checking of what is constantly wrong credit info being put out there. Yeah. I joke around with Mike. I joke around with John every now and then that probably one of the reasons why we don't have thousands and thousands of people tuning into this is because we're not saying anything that's outrageous or weird, like, here, let me show you how to get rid of everything on your credit report, or here's how you can remove all the bad decisions that you've made in the past. Just do these three things, and I mean, if we did stuff like that, John, it'd be complete BS, but this place would be packed full of people. So I definitely applaud those who come here and get education from the time that John and I put in, because it's better to get facts, and your credit score will thank you for it, for sure.
Yeah,
And Mike also.
it's that's right, and that's a fact. If you, I wouldn't call it a negative factor. That negative has a certain connotation to it. I would say that it's not helpful. When people say negative, they think of things like missed payments and collections and
Right.
dogs, things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's been publicized for decades that there is a diversity metric in credit scoring systems, and if you have a broad, broad record of experience with different types of accounts, then you're going to score better. You're going to earn more points in that types of credit managed category versus someone who just has student loans, or someone who just has credit cards, or someone who just has a car loan and has never had anything other than that. You're just simply not going to score as well as someone who has managed the variety of different types of accounts.
Would you say, John, that's just because creditors like to see that you can go outside of just, like, you can manage multiple types of credit successfully, rather than just being like a, what is it called, a one pony show?
One trick pony.
One trick pony. Thank you.
Yeah. So it doesn't really have anything to do with what lenders think. It has to do with what's predictive. And so in the research, to remember, everything that counts in a credit score because it's predictive of risk, right? That's the only reason late payments count. That's the only reason credit card balances count. That's the only thing inquiries count. That's the only thing how long you've had credit counts. The only reason anything counts in a credit score is because there is a correlation between that information and credit risk. Yeah. And that's always the answer to the question: why do inquiries count in my score? Why do negative things hurt my score? Why do maxed out credit cards cause me to have a lower score? That's the answer to every single one of those questions. It's predictive of risk. But we try to kind of put a common sense explanation hat on everything and try to explain it. Oh, well, inquiries have to matter because it indicates you're applying for credit. Oh, well, being in a ton of credit card debt has to matter because credit card debt's expensive and servicing it costs a lot of money and you may not have enough money to pay your other things. So those are all common sense explanations, but the real answer is the reason anything counts on a credit report is because it's predictive. So if you have a collection of different types of accounts, the fact that you have that diverse experience is predictive of credit risk, meaning that if you have it, you're a better credit risk, and if you don't have it, you are an elevated credit risk, which is why not having it can cause you to have a lower score, and having it can cause you to have a higher score.
Yeah. So Mike's got a question. Besides the major three, are there other credit report companies you recommend checking? Check Systems, Innovis, etc.
Well, if you're in the check systems database, it's because you write bad checks. So if you don't write bad checks, then you're not going to be in the check systems database. Innovis Data Solutions, commonly referred to as the fourth credit bureau, they don't sell their credit reports to lenders, and there are no credit scores based off of the Innovis data. There is no FICO score on the Innovis database. Having said that, you have the right to pull your Innovis credit report annually and challenge the information if it's incorrect, just like you have the right to do the same thing with the big three. I would, if you want to take the time to check your Innovis report, great. It's certainly not as important as staying on top of the big three. NCTUE is probably a good one to add to your inventory if you're interested in checking credit reports. That's the National Consumer Telecom and Utilities Exchange. That's the credit bureau for your utility accounts. So you're like your pay TV or your cellular service, things like that. Mm-hmm. And if you have any of those things, then you absolutely have an NCTUE credit report. So you might want to add that to your inventory. But really, other than that, and David and I joke about our LexisNexis Clue report, or not Clue, our LexisNexis reports that are like, 500 and 600 pages long of essentially duplicative addresses and information. That's always a fun one if you have 5 hours of your data waste reviewing that monstrous information. Clue. So LexisNexis also maintains the Clue database. Clue is Comprehensive Loss Underwriting Exchange. It's the credit bureau for insurance companies. And if you have filed a auto or homeowner's claim in the last 7 years, then it's going to be in the Clue database and it will be on your Clue report. If you have not filed a homeowner's or auto claim in the last 7 years, then you will not have a Clue report. So, and that's the report that insurance companies will look at when you're applying for a policy. So they'll obviously, someone who files claims all the time is a higher risk insurance company than someone who does not file claims all the time. So those would be the additional ones that I would look at if you are in fact interested in checking all reports other than the big three.
Excellent. Kimberly, I see your question. Looks like you might have missed the first few minutes of the live. We don't really go through credit repair tactics on this particular live with John, but I will swing back around and answer that question for you because I see you posted it on Facebook.
Yeah, do you want me to explain why I'm like that, David? I mean, we say
sure,
that all the time.
Yeah.
So, and Kimberly, don't leave. I want you to hear this. And David's not ignoring you, he's ignoring you because I told him to ignore you. So here's the deal. So number one is I don't do credit repair, and I've never done credit repair, despite what people may think. From a consumer for anything, I don't have a consumer product. So I don't have a product for a consumer. And B, I don't do credit repair, and I don't do credit repair for a couple of reasons. First off, I'm not the morality police. I don't care if someone does credit repair, and I don't care if someone doesn't do credit repair. It would be great if they all followed the rules, but they're not my children. They're adults, and they get to make their own decision. Number one, I'm in Georgia. Credit repair is illegal in Georgia. All right. Number two is whether or not you want to acknowledge this, credit repair has a really bad reputation because there are some horrible apples that have spoiled the lot for decades. And that's why we have the Credit Repair Organizations Act, because some of these assholes just can't seem to follow the rules. So I don't want to be associated in any way with being a credit repair company, which means I have to draw a line between giving educational answers like the one that I just answered for Mike Kirkwood about different credit reports versus, how to get a charge-off deleted or how to get inquiries deleted or how to get collections deleted. So that's why David answers that question like that, and why whenever I'm involved, we have to kind of draw the line between education and credit repair. And you may wonder, why does that matter? Well, the reason it matters is for a couple reasons. First off, what I'm doing tonight for David is about 1% of what my business does. The other 90+% of what my business does is expert witness work for corporate clients like banks and collection agencies and credit bureaus and insurance companies. And if I was doing credit repair, I would lose the majority of my clients because those clients can't stand credit repair. So it'd be a horrible business decision for me to take money from a consumer and do credit repair. Number two is whenever I'm deposed, which means I'm under oath, which means I'm obligated to tell the truth under the penalty of perjury, which is a felony. I'm almost always asked if I'm involved in credit repair, and I have to be able to say no, I'm not, and be honest about that answer. So there's a whole lot of reasons why I have to draw that line. It's not just because I don't want to answer your question or David doesn't want to answer your question. It's because I'm putting David in the uncomfortable position of having to say no. And so when I pop off this video, David can answer that question all he wants because it doesn't involve me. But that's why we have to take this position with respect to credit repair questions. And we're not alone. This isn't a Credit Versio thing. David knows because he sees me go to these events and present at events in front of hundreds of people. Is I give them the same answer or explanation that I just gave you. When someone starts asking questions about how to get stuff deleted, that I give them the same answer, which is, you're going to have to ask someone who's an expert in credit repair, because A, that's not me, and B, that's not what I do.
Yeah, John, thanks for giving some detail on that, because sometimes
Sure.
it feels like, hey, listen, can't talk about that. I'll swing back
I
around,
know. I know.
but
I know. And
and
I appreciate you doing that, and I realize I'm putting you in a kind of a
well,
weird
yeah,
position.
I mean, not at all. It's a really important topic, and one of the reasons why we can have you here and answering questions for people who are in credit Versio. I mean, you can make a great argument that credit Versio is about credit repair, but there's the flip side of it, which is, hey, you got to understand how credit works, and for us to deliver that benefit, we have to have somebody like you that's completely neutral, away from this industry, that's specifically just a credit expert, and that's, I think, the best way to separate the two.
Oh, look, trust me, there are plenty of people in the credit repair space who think I'm the devil, who think they call me part of the machine,
Oh,
part of the
sure.
credit mafia. They think I'm like a spy on behalf of somebody. I don't know who I'd be a spy on behalf of. Everyone who hates y'all, or not y'all, but everyone who hates credit repair, everyone knows who they are. So it's not like it's a secret that the
Yeah.
CFPB and the FTC and the credit bureaus, it's not a secret they can't stand credit repair. So it's not like, who would I be a spy for? Everything's public
Well,
already. And then there's the other side, which is the people who recognize that it's important to have someone who's giving honest and kind of
yeah,
unvarnished answers to these questions, who isn't giving it from the credit repair perspective, who's giving it kind of a clean from just like
right.
the pure educational perspective.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, not that we need to go on about this, but a lot of times credit repair, they just need to have a villain somewhere, and it's the whole us against them,
Yeah.
and for some reason, and I've even brought Steve Rieger on. I brought people on before who are former bureau high level, either executives or people who were big decision makers within the bureaus, to explain to people like, listen, we're on your side. We want the information to be right, and if it's wrong, we'll take care of it. We'll make sure we get rid of it. But nobody's trying to hurt you here, which seems to be the motif with credit repair more often than not, unfortunately. But excellent. I'm glad you went through that. All right. So Kimberly she's on point. Mike as well.
Man.
Perfect. All right. Great. So here's a subject that I wanted to talk about, John, just to get your take on it. And let me set the stage a little bit for this. I talked about this a couple of weeks back when I had viewers on. We were talking about what I went through during the Great Recession. I was one of those, not credit knowledge at all, not credit savvy at all. And I was one of those guys that owned a ton of property, was highly leveraged credit card wise, because I was, spending 10,000 here, 30,000 here to fix up this place and then sell this place, a lot of flipping. So I did that for a while. And short version of the story is, and this is not going to surprise anybody because we all know how this one played out, but right when everything tanked, fortunately, I sold most of the stuff that I owned, sometimes at a break-even point, sometimes I made a little bit of money. But what happened at the end is I was always telling myself, okay, once I flip this property and I make 100 on that or 50 on that, I'll take care of this credit card debt. And what happened was that the margins weren't there. I was able to escape most of this stuff with only one foreclosure, which is actually saying something considering how much property I held at one time. But I had tens and tens of thousands, almost $100,000 worth of credit card debt from all of that property, and that's really what wiped me out. So I approach, just my opinion. I'm not an economist, I'm not a financial guru, but I'm of the age, John, you and I both, where we've seen what's happening right now before. It always has a little bit of a different slant, but you can look at what's going on and go, okay, well, it looks like the economy is getting ready to reset, as it does every decade or so. It used to be every 5 years, 5 to 7 years, but you can print your way out of this stuff for a little while. But my approach now, looking at what's going on, like, okay, I'm not making the same mistake twice. Not that I would be inclined to carry a lot of credit card debt, but I talked about things that I do differently now to sort of prepare myself for what looks to be happening, might happen. And John, I thought you might have maybe a little take on some best practices, or at least some things to consider if and when our economy does go through the shift, the reset, or the adjustment that a lot of people expect us to go through.
Like, number one, the fact that if you're still employed, you're still in a pretty good position,
Mm-hmm.
because um, it's an employees market right now, not an employer's market. It's an employees
Right.
market. Um, the unemployment rate is extraordinarily low, and there are jobs that just no one's willing to do them right now. It's definitely an employees market versus
Yeah.
08, 09, where it was like, oh my God, unemployment spiked and it was an employer's market.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one of the big differences, is that to the extent that you're willing to work, then there's still plenty of places where you can go find a job. So that's number one. Number two is, man, oh man, I really hope people learn their lesson after 08, 09, which is that this stuff really does happen. It's cyclical, right? And just because
Yeah.
things were fantastic 24 months ago or 36 months ago, it doesn't mean that they're always going to be fantastic.
Right.
So I would love to think that people who went through 08, 09 learned their lesson and realized that, I probably should never ever put myself into an overextension position or overly extended position, where if something does happen, if the value of my home goes down, or if interest rates move against me, or God forbid I lose my job, or a spouse or a working partner loses their job, that it doesn't really make that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. And
Right.
I think there's something else to also keep in mind, is that what happened after COVID with respect to credit card debt is almost the opposite of what you common sense would have expected.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think when you said, okay, you have COVID, all these places, restaurants are closing, people aren't going out, airlines aren't flying, man, they're going to lay off people big time. They're going to have to start living off their credit cards, and credit card debt is going to go up. No,
That's what I
it did
expected.
not
Yeah.
happen. It went
Yep.
the other way. People's credit card
Opposite.
debt went down. So it actually, so just because we think something may happen, that was a real eye opener, that experts don't necessarily always get it right.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to also keep in mind. And the last thing that I think that's also really, really, really important. And I'll tell you what the market closed at today. I have it right here on my little widget. So the market closed at 30,482. That's what the Dow closed, and it was down about 50 points. So for those of you who care about that or understand what that means, the Dow was at 36,000 previously, and it's down. It's down, 6,000 points. And if you've checked your 401k or any of your major stock holdings or mutual funds in the last year or two, it's down and down a lot. You have a lot of red figures. So people look at that and they panic. And they do what's called panic selling, meaning that they think that they're going to lose all their money, and they sell at some point on the way down. And what they do when they sell is they lock in their losses. Right now, you haven't lost any money. It's all paper value. It's the value of paper. So if you invested $1,000 into Delta Airlines, today it may be worth $800, and you may think you've lost $200, but you really haven't, unless you sell. Then you've locked in that $200 loss. So that's one of the things that I used to always argue with people in the 08, 09 meltdown, is people are like, oh my God, we've lost all this money. I'm like, no, you haven't. You haven't lost a dime. It's just the value of your holdings have gone down. And if you won't panic and you'll give the world time to reset and it goes back up, you'll see. In fact, you should be pouring more money into the market when it's down, because now you're buying at a discount. So, and that's hard to do. Look, any knucklehead can buy at Dow 36,000. That doesn't take, that doesn't take commitment. Right now, it takes commitment to put a whole lot of money in the market, because you don't know if we're still going to go down further or if we hit the bottom. And no one can predict. No one can time the bottom. The best stock analysts can't predict the bottom, even though they represent that they can. So those are some things that I always try to tell people is look, if red numbers bother you, then stop staring at your holdings. I don't know that I've checked anything that I own for months because I know that they're getting killed, and I don't want to look at it and be like, yeah, I knew they were getting killed, and I just verified they're getting killed. It doesn't matter to me. I'm 54 years old. I care about all that stuff in about 16 or 17 years. That's when I
Right.
really care about that stuff.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just another buying opportunity because it's, I'm, peak in the valley. I'm buying in the
Yeah.
valley right now. So
Well, it's a
there's some things I think to keep in mind, and to some extent, the market has kind of adjusted. Right? Do you remember the liar loans, the no doc loans?
oh the no income, no asset.
Yeah,
We joked
yeah,
around. It was
yeah.
the ninja loan. No income, no job.
That's right. People who sold Avon were telling banks they made $1 million a year, and the banks were like, "Great, here's a
Sure. Yeah.
loan."
Let's make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah,
How fast can we close this?
yeah. So and then you remember the First Plus home of the 120 LTV loan. Is
Oh yeah.
they would let you borrow 120% of the appraised value of the house.
Yeah.
So
Oh
none
man.
of that stuff that stuff is all gone, thankfully. And so to
Yeah.
some extent, the lenders were not letting us be as irresponsible now as they let us be back in 08, 09, because a lot of those loan products don't even exist any longer. So
Yeah. No, they're gone.
it's a different animal this time around than last time around.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about Milton Friedman's line is the fear greed factor is like you want to buy when people are afraid, and you want to sell when people are greedy.
Yeah,
And that's what's
right.
going on right now. Is everything is dropping and dropping and dropping, and it's a sale. Like there are people like you, John, like me, like listen, it's going to be unfortunate when everything comes back around, and it will be an employer's market again. One of the things I talked about with a couple of friends of mine is like you better be solid in your job. I mean, because what's going to happen is when employers start to trim, and they will, when things get lean, they're going to look around. They're like, well, all these work from home fools that kind of held us hostage, let's get rid of them, unless we got a couple of good ones. Everybody who's coming back in the office, now we're going to do an appraisal of everybody in there, and whoever is indispensable, those are the ones that are going to get kept. And I think there's going to be a lot of pruning taking place. So that, and that's the unfortunate part. But there's going to be a lot of stuff going on sale here already, and what, $1 trillion of crypto has been wiped out. I know.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not supposed to be a financial webinar, but it kind of ended up that way. But so much of this stuff, John, is tied into credit because it's very interconnected.
Well, that's the tip of the sword, right? I mean, when all these things happen to us, when we go to apply for loans, the first thing they look at is the credit report and the credit score. And so
Yeah.
and then the question becomes, well, wait a minute, why is your credit score so low? Well, I lost my job, my crypto's valueless. I work from home, so I got fired. That's always the backstory, but the tip of the sword is always the credit report and the score.
Right.
And regardless of what you think about Elon Musk, the guy who did not start Tesla, by the way, he's just the president of Tesla.
Yeah.
Who I like a lot because he's brilliant, and that's important to me. I think he's thrown the first salvo, which is no, work from home is not the future for our companies. Work in the office is the future for our companies because people are more productive when they can bounce ideas off each other versus just kind of working in a silo. And so he's actually, I think, the first CEO of a major company that said, no, we're not going to stay at a work from home model forever. In fact, get your butt back in the office. He's one of the more unafraid CEOs. I think a lot of CEOs are terrified of doing something like that because they don't want to get dragged on social media, being a mean CEO or whatnot. I don't think he cares. So, but I agree with you. I think it's an employees market, an employers market, employees market, employers market, and it will flip back to being an employers market, which is where your unemployment rate is super, super low. It's hard to find a job. You may remember where there was 10 or 15 applicants for every open position. And again, it always comes back to credit, because if your credit report sucks and someone who is equally as qualified as you has a fantastic credit report, I don't know, you tell me which one they're going to hire.
Yeah. Well, or can hire. If you're looking at any kind of a background check, any security clearance. Forget about working for the government. There's a lot of opportunities that are going to be removed simply because you have a credit file that they would consider to be high risk.
That's right.
Yeah, so a lot of interesting changes coming up. Okay, so we are coming up to the end. Are there any other questions that John and I can answer? Yeah, so John, while we're waiting to see if anybody wants to pop on, I think it's going to be a very interesting 6 to 24 months. That, I would never hold a lot of credit card debt ever again. I would tell everybody, make sure that you're that person that's coming in early and staying late, because just if you were around, if you are old enough to have been in the workforce back in 08, 09, just remember what that was like. I think people don't consider, like, well, that happened in the past, it's never going to happen again. Well, it's going to happen again. It's just going to be different as far as how we get there. But these things just go in cycles, like you said, John.
Yep.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. Well, if anybody else has a question, you can always leave it here. I circle back around and answer those, usually within 24 hours. John, that was a good live. We covered a lot of great topics. Yeah.
The fastest 15 minutes on the internet.
No joke. All right. Well, everybody that's watching, thank you so much for joining me today. And John, thank you for all the great information. And we will call it a day, and we'll see you again Wednesday next week. John, thank you very much.
Sir, bye now.